For Session Update, I'm Shannon Loehrke. The minimum wage continues to be a hotly debated topic in both national and state politics, and affordable access to childcare continues to strain Minnesota checkbooks. Joining me in the studio to talk about his bill, the Worker Justice Bill, which would increase family tax credits, make childcare affordable for low-income workers, and phase in a higher minimum wage, is Senator John Marty. Welcome, Senator.
Glad to be with you.
As of August 1st last year, the minimum wage moved to $9 an hour. It's expected to rise to $9.50 on August of this year. And that rate is close to the inflation-adjusted rate from the 70s. And it's also going to be adjusted annually from now on, beginning in 2018. So you're proposing $15 an hour. Is that a bit drastic?
Well, it's phased in over several years. We would continue, because again, we've had 3 years of phasing it up to the $9.50 this year. I would continue raising it up a little bit each year so we could hit $15 an hour in 2022. California's passed a law to do the same thing. And I guess what I'd do is say, first of all, I think that would be the best we've done in minimum wage. Right now, even where we are now is well behind where it was in the late 60s. But I think we have to recognize there are a lot of working people who are working 2 jobs who can't make ends meet. They can't afford to pay for basic necessities. I think if you ask people in Minnesota, anywhere, any corner of Minnesota, if you think that workers who are working full-time ought to be living in poverty, I say, no, that's not fair. That's not right. That's not the way it should be. And minimum wage can't take care of all of it. And I wouldn't want to do it overnight. That would be really strain on the economy. So you do it a gradual phase in as we've been doing. Just continue that phase in for several more years. And recognize that there are other ways you can help as well. Affordable childcare. We've had a program for years. We were one of the first states to have one, but it keeps slipping in the level of support. So parents, low-income parents who are trying to get their kids into childcare, they have very few options. It's very expensive, and the childcare providers don't get paid much. It's not a good situation. As we focus on early learning, we want to make sure all kids have childcare and quality childcare. So we'd be putting money into that too. And again, I'd make the argument that the other way we should address wages of low-income workers is not just minimum wage, but also through the earned income tax credit. Right. Minnesota's had a program. This would roughly triple it. Because I think, again, all of these things, well, they're controversial. Well, maybe they're controversial on their own, but it's a big picture. Do we want working people living in poverty where they can't afford housing for their family, they can't afford food, basic necessities? I think overwhelmingly, I'd guess 80% of the public, 75% of the public says, no, that's not right.
Well, and I think this brings me to my next point, because it seems to me that talk about minimum wage is really more about the stagnant wages overall of the economy. The middle class is getting squeezed, the upper incomes are increasing, the poverty is growing. And actually, Pew Research Center showed a study that middle income families now are a minority. They used to be a majority, now they're a minority, and it's the upper and lower middle classes. So we're talking about minimum wage, but this is actually a broader conversation.
It's meant to be bringing up middle wages and everything else, because frankly, if the minimum wage, and this would be several years out yet, but if the minimum wage is $15 an hour, an employer who wants to keep their workers and so on has to give them raises and so on, and it pushes up the bottom end, the bottom half of the middle class, which is the people who are being really scrunched. And I think that the public here, they don't hear politicians talking about that, which is why in the presidential race, the one candidate who's got the biggest crowds, Bernie Sanders, has been talking about this, and people are saying, well, that's fair. Why don't we do this? And the recognition when you have a handful of individuals have as much wealth as the bottom half of the country, I think people they're asking, is this fair the way we're doing things now? And so again, when some people would say, well, $15 an hour minimum wage and funding the child care, I think a lot of people think a lot of people in the political world, the lobbyists and people at the Capitol sort of think that's way off the side. That's way out of normal politics. But the American public, the Minnesotans, are saying, hey, let's give fairness to working people. And I think that's what there's a huge cry for people. Let's take a look at, is our economy stacked against middle class and lower income people? And I'm saying let's try and address that.
What about the concern that raising the minimum wage puts low-skilled workers, out of work?
Well, we have, right now, frankly, we have people looking for employees. And I'd say, yeah, we have to make sure we find jobs for people, but right now the trouble is we're just pinching people who work 2 and 3 jobs because they can't make it on one. And when you're trying to raise a child or children and you're trying to work 2 jobs, it's not a good mix. And no, I mean, there have been plenty of studies about this, and yeah, if we were to jump to 15 an hour today, I think it would be a huge shock on the economy. It would be hard. I think if you do it over a period of time, no, this is not meant to be some radical notion. This is simply, how can we move in a smooth, steady way, how can we move to a fairer economy? And if you can't make ends meet at $10 an hour or $9 an hour, if you can't pay the bills, it's not working for those families. And I want it to work. I want the economy to work for all families, not just the wealthy, not just upper middle income, but lower middle income, everybody.
So one more question just about the minimum wage. 33% of hourly workers work in the service industry, so restaurants and those types of businesses. Business owners argue they can't pay these higher wages. How would you address that? I mean, restaurants do operate on a smaller margin.
Right. Yeah. They do operate on a smaller margin. And there is some, one of the issues they'll say is, well, may force people raise their prices, and they do some. Well, isn't that harder on low income people? Well, not as much as, in effect, what we're doing is slowly making a shift here from higher end to lower end, and that pushes up the middle as well. So I think, yeah, I'm not trying to make it hard for businesses. I'm trying to be sensitive to it. That's why, while we would kick in the higher earning income tax credit right away, we kick in the childcare subsidy right away, but the minimum wage, we're doing it on a gradual, phased-in approach, and being sensitive to that. I don't doubt that. Keep in mind, there are businesses who go under every day, and there are new businesses that start every day, and we want to be sensitive to their needs, but we also want to make sure that if you could make a very successful business paying all your workers $2 an hour, that's not the kind of business we want to promote, though. We want to promote one that's good for the workers and the business owner. And to tell the truth, if you have a lot more people making enough money that they can pay for their necessities,
sure,
I want to have it so we don't need food shelves in the state anymore, or we don't have a second free grocery stores for people based on their need. I want to have it so workers can make it so they can participate in the economy fully. And that's good for retailers, that's good for fast food joints, that's good for the economy as a whole.
So let's just talk about childcare for 1 minute. Your bill would eliminate the waiting list for childcare assistance. Why is there a waiting list?
Because we haven't put the money in for it, and it's really great. We get somebody who we're trying to keep them off welfare, and a single parent or second parent who's trying to get a job, they find that they get to an employer says, I'll hire you, you can start Monday morning, and they say, well, I got to wait till I can line up childcare. Well, how long will that be? Oh, 2 years. That doesn't work. We got some counties, some counties, there are a couple of years to get on the waiting list. Okay. You shouldn't have any waiting list. If you are qualified for it, because again, a lot of parents, they spend more on childcare than they spend on housing.
I know that personally.
It's a huge issue. And for people at the bottom end, let's make sure that those kids, because they only get one childhood, make sure they are raised in a safe place when the parents are out working. And so trying to boost this, I think getting rid of that waiting list, if we want people to be working, the old line of working instead of welfare, that's right. We want people to be working, and that means we have to make sure their child care is affordable and it's quality child care. And I think this fits together. It's a nice package.
So last question. You've introduced this now at the end of session. Why introduce it now? Why not wait until next year?
I had similar bills. I put the 15 an hour minimum wage thing in here because I think there's actually people recognizing that that's what we have to do. Yes, I intend to reintroduce it next year. I put it in now so it's not a new idea next year, but that the concept.
Start the conversation.
Yeah, get the conversation going, and it really does focus on there's a huge public cry for, and that is, let's make it so working people aren't living in poverty, so they can pay for housing, so they can pay for food, so they can pay for clothing, all the necessities, transportation for their families. We want Minnesotans, we all do better, as Paul Wellstone said, when we all do better. Even the wealthiest Minnesotans will do better when the middle class and lower middle class can make ends meet. That's what we're trying to do.
Senator Marty, thank you for your time.
My pleasure.